Hi, everyone. This is Tom Parmalee. I'm the founder of funeralvision.com. And today I am joined by Alan Creedy, Chief Strategist at Creedy and Company. And Alan has announced the next installment of his highly engaging workshop series, formerly known as Busman's Holidays, the Blue Ocean Tour. The 3-day workshop will be May 12th to May 14th in Minnesota, and it's going to explore some innovative blue ocean strategies. Welcome, Alan.
Hey, thank you.
Um, I guess my first question is, you previously called this event something different, Busman's Holidays. So, interesting name. I was wondering how you came up with that name and why the change to Blue Ocean.
Well, this whole thing started, and I'll try to be brief on this because I would often have clients ask me to help them solve problems. And then I would usually end the conversation by telling them they should go visit another funeral home who had already dealt with that same problem. And they never would. They just never would do it. I would call that funeral home and say, so and so is going to call you, and would you see him? And of course, I tell people all the time, you've heard me say this before, that the cheapest R&D, research and development you can do is a plane ticket. Go see somebody. Well, Busman's Holiday started because I said I got frustrated and I said, okay, fine, I'll just take them. And so I got a group of about 30 funeral homes. We went to see at that time Anderson McQueen. That was the first one. So Busman's Holidays to Blue Ocean. In England, it is part of their culture that you, for your vacation, or they call it holiday, you'll go visit somebody in a similar profession. So a lawyer will go visit a lawyer, a doctor will go visit, and they call it busman's holidays. It comes from, bus drivers who take bus trips for their holiday. But in the United States, nobody understood that term. So later in the process, I discovered Blue Ocean Strategy. You can look it up on Google, and that is really what we're talking about. So blue oceans are competitive oceans that are pretty free. They're new disruptive innovations, which is a large part of what we're going to see in Minnesota, as opposed to red oceans where all competitors are competing in the same way in the same market. So uh, one of the innovations we've seen in our lifetime, maybe not happy about, is low end price competitors, direct cremation, and so on. That was a disruptor. That was a blue ocean. All right. More and more people got into it. It started getting a little pink, but that's how it worked. What we're going to do in Minnesota is see the Washburn McCreevy Funeral Home, and then we're going to go see the Cremation Society of Minnesota. And those are two very contrasting strategies, but they're still blue ocean.
Now, this event, your Blue Ocean event, includes these two tours. I think a lot of times people think of a funeral service event and they think of a convention hall or being in a room at a hotel, a conference room. This is a lot different. Why don't
Very
you
different.
just why don't you just sort of walk us through the general framework of the event? Are people staying at a certain hotel, or do they stay where they want and then gather somewhere? I mean, a lot of people are probably wondering, how does it all work?
Well, I'm going to give you a little framework, but before I do that, I'm going to answer your question. I get a block of rooms in a given hotel. Uh, and virtually, Tom, I do everything I can to keep that group together the whole time. So we eat dinner together, we eat lunch together, we eat breakfast together. We're in the same vicinities. When we go to the venues like Washburn McCreevy and Cremation Society, we'll all be on one bus. So, and the reason for that is is severalfold. One is I've learned over the years that the best content for the attendees is each other. That networking, it's sharing stories, etc. They learn more from each other than they're ever going to learn from the people giving lectures, and they know it. So I absolutely force as much of that as I possibly can. And sometimes, if I know one person is struggling with a given issue and I know somebody else has already dealt with it, I'll introduce them. So, and that's why I limit it to 30, 35 people as well. The other thing And you've been around as long as I have, or almost as long, and so you probably experienced the same thing. I was very frustrated many years ago with the lack of impact that comes about from the conventional lecture style seminar. And studying it over time, I learned that the typical person drawn to this profession does not necessarily learn well in a seminar. They like going to seminars, they enjoy going to seminars, I think mostly because they get to talk to other funeral directors, but that's not how they learn. So I converted my approach from the lecture style to the laboratory style. So let me give you an example I shared with you earlier, um, that one of the things we're going to focus on in this is artificial intelligence. But rather than having someone come in and talk to the group about artificial intelligence, we're going to pay for a 1 month subscription to Chat GPT 4.0. We're going to ask people to bring their laptops, and then we're going to do a laboratory and ask them to use uh, that device to, for instance, write an obituary or do market research or find or write a condolence letter. It could be anything. I was I went to see my sophomore granddaughter uh, wrestle at the state championship in Missouri this last week, and one of the things that came out of that, she won 2 matches, lost 2 matches. She didn't make it to the finals. I'm not a comforting person, so I asked my Chat GPT to write a comforting letter to a sophomore in high school who had lost a wrestling match. That was pretty good. It did a great job. It needed editing, but it did a really good job. So there's a lot of stuff. And you may not know this, and I'm talking too much. You may want to filter this out, but one of the things I've heard about the advent of the motorized hearse more than 100 years ago was that it gave the funeral director an advantage in that it allowed them to do more than one funeral a day. I think AI is going to have the very same impact. The very same impact.
That all sounds wonderful, Alan. Great hands-on experience you're going to be giving them with AI, and I'm sure they're going to appreciate that subscription. Let's talk a little bit about the site visits.
Yeah,
Washburn McReevy.
yeah.
What impressed you about that firm? And why did you pick that firm in particular to take a site visit to for this event?
Washburn McCreevy represents to me a very high quality traditional funeral home for the most part. Uh, that was just your average funeral home. They have, I think, 170 years old now. And just the traditional style funeral home until about 30 years, 40, maybe, yeah, about 30 years ago. And seeing into the future, being future oriented, they realized that they could not continue to be viable in the way that they were operating their business at that time. And so they deliberately began to invest in their future. And the path they chose was to expand dramatically. I think what 12 locations funeral wise and 4 very high end cemeteries in that area, which is a learning curve, a big learning curve for most funeral homes. And so they made themselves they reached into the future using their reputation and their solid business to take advantage of where trends were going. So now they're doing slightly less than 4,000 calls a year, which makes them one of the biggest privately held funeral homes in the country. So I wanted the group to just hear about the thinking and what the challenges were and so on and so forth. And then you've got the Cremation Society, and I don't know if you've met Kevin Waterston or whatever, but a, a very similar starting point in that they had an established funeral home and they saw where things were going in the future in 1980. This was really, you're not old enough, but I am. to remember that the national cremation rate was probably 3% at that time. So nobody was really even thinking about it, but they saw that blue ocean and ended up building, I think they do, don't hold me to this, it's either 7,000 or 10,000 services a year. Plus they still have their conventional operation. So these two funeral homes at critical turning points in the maturation of the profession, uh, decided to move into that blue ocean area. Okay. And I'm sure you do, we both know that, because they were disruptors, the local funeral homes and maybe a lot of different funeral homes hated them for doing what they did. But here we are where the proof is in the pudding.
Now you're going to be joined by your business colleague at this event, Danny Jefferson.
That's right.
Talk to me a little bit about what he brings to the table and the role he'll play, in sort of mediating and being at the event.
Well, Danny is starting to emerge as our AI expert. But Tom, years and years ago, probably 20 some odd years ago, and I think you were part of this, if I'm not mistaken, um, I began to realize that the way families are approached in the actual arrangement conference was becoming outdated. There needed to be a new approach. But I'm not a funeral director, and so I never felt comfortable. I mean, I talked to a lot of funeral directors who are being successful at making that transition, but I've never made arrangements for the family, so I never felt comfortable positioning myself as an expert. I can make suggestions, but I really haven't ever sat in that seat. Danny, on the other hand, not only solved the problem, but he developed, and it's really been growing, developed a training approach that is not an academic approach or a theoretical approach, but it's a practical approach that has demonstrated for a number of years not only its ability to improve family loyalty, but and increase average sale, but to grow market share. So it's different. It's assertive. Uh, there is a lot of traditional funeral directors see it as being somewhat threatening to their relationship with the family. Truth be known, not only is it not threatening, but families really appreciate, and we think that's why the loyalty increases, the process that he uses. It's a three-stage process. Takes about 4 minutes, 45 minutes to get through the whole thing. But the other part that Danny brings to the table is being a sole practitioner. He built his firm from 61 calls when he bought it to over 300 about 10 years later. And the reason that happened, out of one location, um, he was able to do that with no money by reinventing, and I'm sorry, that's a powerful word, but he basically reinvented the business model within funeral homes. So the typical funeral licensee serves about 85 to 90 families a year. That's the metric. Danny's funeral directors, and I've met several that have adopted similar practices, they serve 150 to 200 families a year without sacrificing personal care.
Now, for the Blue Ocean tour, can vendors get involved? I mean, can vendors attend, or can they sponsor the event somehow? Or is it simply, funeral directors only?
Well, Tom, I have over the years, I have not made any effort to get sponsorship. I guess maybe I should, but the other side of the sponsorship is then it's kind of like a de facto endorsement. And so, on a personal level, for instance, I made a decision 40 years ago that I was not going to get involved in the casket wars. I wasn't going to choose one casket company over another. All right. Now, I have an opinion, and sometimes I might express that opinion on a private basis if I'm asked, but when I do express that opinion, I will give reasons for expressing that opinion. So no, I mean, if a vendor were to approach me and say we would like to sponsor this, I would listen. I'd be receptive to it, but I don't make any effort to go out and find sponsorships.
So again, the 3-day workshop, the Blue Ocean Tour, it's going to be May 12th to 14th in Minnesota. Where can people go to learn more if they want to sign up, if they're interested? You want to give your email address or your phone number even, please feel free. What
I'll
can they
do
do if they
that,
want
but
to get
would you
information?
be able to attach a link to this?
Um, I can do that. Yeah.
So I'll give you a link. They go right to the page. They learn all about it. Now, I do have to tell you that I have a very unusual uh, charging practice, fee practice. All right. And that is that I bill after you reserve it. So there's no provision for you to pay for anything on the site. Once you've registered, I'll send you an invoice probably through PayPal or something like that. But you don't sign up and pay at the same time.
All right. That's good to know.
Let me,
Any final thoughts that you want to share about
well,
the Blue Ocean
a
Tour, the
couple
event?
things, a couple things, and I'm just going to take a stand here. Without any negative opinion about the current business model of funeral homes, and still current, my fundamental belief is that the successful funeral home in the future will adopt a different business model. And that business model is probably going to look like a lot like a lawyer's or a doctor's business model. And it really has licensed people doing licensee things and non-licensed people. But that's very fearful for a lot of people. So it's going to be the younger people. And I like to use the kind of allegorical story. Um, if it's the year 1870, all right, and your business, which is also a furniture business, uh, you think that you dominate your area because you make the best coffins in the area. All right. Now your 25-year-old son's joined you, and he goes off to the very first NFDA convention. And he comes back and says, Dad, I think we ought to quit building coffins and start buying these ready-made caskets from this company down the street. I don't think that was a pleasant conversation. And I'm pretty sure that Dad continued to make coffins for people that asked for him for the next 20 years. But that was a transformational event. And we're at the same point. We're at a transformational time in funeral service. And it's not that we have to forget the quality of service or abandon the quality of service. And that's why Danny and I talk so much about radical hospitality, but that it's a new business model.
Well, Alan, I have to commend you on what you're doing. I know these events, especially when you incorporate tours, they are not easy. So kudos to you and Danny and your team. Everyone listening, again, Alan Creedy's Blue Ocean Tour, May 12th to May 14th in Minnesota,
Oh,
where
and
he's
seats are limited. I don't no more than 35. You can bring one other person from your firm. Uh, that's it. And otherwise, we start losing the efficacy of the experience.
well, there you have it. And we will definitely include a link going with this video and the article that accompanies it. And please reach out to Alan if you need more information. And Alan, thanks so much for joining me.
Thank you, Tom.